Welcome to Light from Light, another episode here with a friend of mine, Darragh, who's joining us from Ireland. Darragh and I met in Rome recently, went on a pilgrimage there for the Jubilee for Youth, which was a really powerful experience. Darragh and I are part of a Palatine parishes, and we were very fortunate that the Palatine Fathers, they follow St. Vincent Pallotti. They sent me and they sent Darragh from Ireland to go to Rome and to be a part of this Jubilee for Youth. And you might actually realize Darragh and I are not really young. We're not really youth ourselves, but we were sent to be a part of this group to really enliven these young people in their faith and encourage them. And it was a really powerful experience. I'll introduce you, Darragh, in a minute, but I was, this week is the build up to the canonization for Blessed Carlo Acutis and Blessed Per Giorgio Frassati. And this week I saw an interview which Carlo Acutis had with his mum, Carlo Acutis' mum, had this interview. And she said that she had a dream where St. Francis of Assisi came to her. And he said, when your son Carlo is canonized, there will be a great many thousands of people who will follow as a generation of saints. So there will be a great many young people becoming this generation of saints. And I think, Darragh, you as well would say we saw that in Rome.
Yeah.
Over 1 million young people who were there, and we could speak about that a bit later as well. It was a wonderful experience.
Yeah.
But so Darragh and I we met in Rome at this great Jubilee for Youth. And Darragh, you were there and you shared your testimony of faith and what God had done in your life, and it was so powerful that I wanted to just invite you onto this to share it with more people and share it with some of the people who follow, Light from Light, just to see and just to hear it and to be encouraged by what God does in our life. So maybe, Darragh, if you could explain a little bit about who you are, where you're from, and what the Lord has done in your life.
Yeah, thanks, Daniel. It was a pleasure and honour to be able to share my testimony with you here tonight. Yeah, I suppose the Lord can work miracles when you let him into your heart. He definitely can. Yeah, I suppose a little bit about myself. My name is Darragh Kelehan and I come from Dublin in Ireland, and I was brought up in a Catholic family. I was baptised, can't remember that, but I was told I was baptised. I made me Holy Communion. And I remember after that I was did a little bit of Bible study and stuff like that in the church, and then my confirmation came up. And I suppose it was after my confirmation, Dan, that I kind of veered a little bit away from the Lord then, The money and the material things in life start to take over. Going out with the lads, going to church and Bible study wasn't fun, Getting up to bedevilment was fun, I had 2 older brothers and I had a younger sister. I suppose I kind of grew up in a rough part of Dublin. So my 2 older brothers kind of got me into that role all right, They toughened me up for the streets, as 2 older brothers usually do. And we kind of just me and the lads would get up to all sorts of mischief, But I was very sports active, I used to do karate. I was nearly a 3rd brown belt at the age of 8 years of age. And the karate club closed down before I could try and go for a black belt. So I started playing soccer, and I loved soccer, and I threw everything into it. And I kind of grew up then playing football with the lads on the street and up to no good. And I suppose the area that I came up with was ravaged with drink and drugs. And I would have got me taste of alcohol at quite a young age. My mother and father liked to have a drink around social party and stuff like that. But back then in the 80s, you were given a can of beer. It wouldn't be frowned upon to have a sup if I'd take the end of a pint of Guinness off your dad in the pub, that was all right. And I quite liked what alcohol did to me, Dan. So when I was 12 or 13, I'd be going to discos on a Friday night in the local GAA club. And I'd cut my brother's grass for him because he was a good few years older than me, and he'd buy me 2 cans of beer. And me and the lads would go off and have a couple of cans of beer and go to the disco. And I liked the feeling that alcohol gave me, It was quite nice, and it gave me a lot of courage, and it gave me a sense of belonging and stuff like that, Dan. I could go up and ask girls out to dance, and I'd know I wasn't embarrassed about how I danced or that like that. So I quite liked it, but I suppose me I showed very early signs of addiction, Dan, because I always wanted more than my friends. And I never really wanted to stop. And I was always looking for the next thing and the next thing. And I suppose I went on through my life like that, growing up in the years then when I was 13, 14, 15, introduced to hash, LSD, ecstasy. I was 15, I was going into nightclubs, 24-hour raves in Dublin in the scene at the time, back in the 90s. And I was doing raves, doing these, and going straight playing football match the next day, sometimes still on drugs and stuff. But I won Player of the Year 3 years in a row for one of the best schoolboy teams in Dublin. A lot of players that played with me went abroad to England. And I'll never forget my manager used to keep saying to me, they used to call me Kilo, and they'd say, Kilo, give up your Saturday nights and I'll send you over to England. He was a scout for a couple of clubs, but I just love my Saturday nights. And I remember I finished school and I did my leaving cert, and then I wanted to be a carpenter from a very young age. I met a beautiful girl actually before I finished my leaving cert, and we were quite young. We were only 15 and 13 when we started going out with each other. I fell in love and did all the great things you do when you're young. I got an apprenticeship in a carpenter then, Dan. And that was it. Worked every week, worked hard during the week, the party hard at the weekend. I was still living in my ma's at the time, and things was great. I came out, finished my apprenticeship, and then I went on, got an apartment, myself and Irish, then ended up getting engaged. And like that, just progressed, partied hard, and life took over. I suppose it all kind of came crumbling down for me down when I got into trouble with the guards. I was in an accident. I broke my wrist, my nose, and smashed all my back teeth. And I couldn't really walk anymore because I was self-employed. I had no way of making money. So I started selling drugs for the time being just to make money. But I got myself into a lot of trouble. And
Who's
a
that?
long story,
What would the guards be?
the
Sorry.
guards would be the police. They would
Right.
be the police, the Irish version of the police. Yeah.
Yeah. So you
Yeah.
got in trouble with them.
Got in trouble with them. I got in trouble with my brother. My brother was involved in paramilitary organisations and stuff like that. And I would have got into trouble with them then, yeah. I got caught with a lot of drugs. It was a Section 15A. So that's like a 10-year mandatory prison sentence in Ireland. Yeah. And I owed my drug dealer all the money because the cash was found with the drugs as well in the apartment. But yeah, it was a bit of a crazy one, and I ended up falling out with Eilish over the stress that we were going through and stuff like that. She broke up with me, and I was out on my own then, kind of back living in me ma's, all this shame, all this guilt, all this worry, what's going to happen to me and stuff like that. I had to go back walking. My wrist was kind of better at this stage, so I went back walking, but there was a guy walking with me, and he used to smoke heroin. And I remember sitting there, I was just smoking hash at the time, and I'd done all the party drugs, coke and everything like that, but I had my limits because I seen what heroin used to do to people around my area. But I remember sitting there one day looking at it and going, that just numbs your brain, doesn't it? Because I thought I was looking at 10 years in prison. My brother wanted to bring me up to the mountains and shoot me. My drug dealer wanted the money. So I'm like, here I am. What else have I got to do? And I just remember saying to him, that numbs your brain, doesn't it? And he said, yeah. So I had a few lines of this bag of heroin, and that was it then. I fell in love with it. And I went on a roller coaster of a ride. Crazy. The drug dealer ended up getting shot in a feud in Dublin. So I didn't know him the money. Police that night, it was New Year's Eve 2001, and they made an illegal search on the flat that I was staying in. They had no search warrant. So that got thrown out of court. And I ended up making up with my brother. We patched things up and we made things up. But I always say, Dan, I did a 25-year drug sentence then. The next 25 years I was abusing drugs from heroin, crack cocaine, alcohol, weed, tablets, nearly all every day or some most days. I'd get bouts in between that I wouldn't take some drugs, I just take other drugs. And I'd get bouts where I tried to tried to get my head together. I bought a house and I got married. All this time, my wife didn't know what I was getting up to. Now, 'cause I was very good at lying and hiding things, Dan. Yeah, I used to smoke weed, and so did my wife at the time, and we do party drugs. But I kept the hard stuff. I kept that on my own. So she used to see me eyes and think I was just stoned from smoking weed or taking a few pills or something like that. And I kept that going. But she actually found out we got married in Rome, Dan. in 2004, the 10th of September 2004. And she found out on a honeymoon that I was actually addicted to heroin because when we went to Florence, I spilt the methadone, which is a heroin substitute that I took. And I spilt that. And she found out I was going through cold turkey on a honeymoon. And she found out then, you know. God love the girl, she stuck by me and I promised that I'd manage to get my head together and I'd try. And I did, I really tried, Dan, but I never really worked, you know. I didn't know. I tried everything, man and medicine to get off drugs and nothing really worked. I got over to England, I went to Leeds. I got knocked to sleep for 5 days. They put you to sleep while you withdraw from heroin. And I came back today. They gave me an opiate blocker, and I came back that day and I tried to use heroin to see would the opiate blocker work after paying €7,000 to go to England. Yeah, you know, and I didn't know that. I just thought if you stop taking the drugs, you'll be all right. You know, I didn't realize what it was I suffered from. I suffer from the disease of addiction, you know, and it's like, you know, most of the time it's not the drink or the drug or the substance that's the problem. The problem is deeper than that, you know. And we just at that time I thought to stop taking the substance and I'll be all right. But I never was, you know. I'd
Mm.
shoot from one to another and keep going back, keep falling back onto it, you know.
And Dara, you said earlier so the thing makes you escape your brain, it numbs your brain,
Yeah,
right? At the beginning, that's why you tried heroin, right?
yeah,
So it's like an escape
yeah.
at that point. But then when you got off from the police sentence, the drug dealer he passed. But what was the reason for keep going back to it? Was it the same reason to escape or to was maybe if you just describe what addiction is like
So
during
once it gets a hold of you, especially heroin, but mostly any substance, you know, because it's not just heroin. People abuse all substances. People can use sex, food, you know, doesn't even have to be a drug now. But I only know this now, Dan, but at the time I didn't know. It's like once it gets a hold of you, you have to keep doing it, you know. I know heroin is very physical. There's a lot of physical withdrawals off it. So you go through cold turkey if you don't get it and you don't sleep for weeks and stuff like that. So that in itself was very hard to come off. But that wasn't the hard part. The hard part was your mind. Oh, because an addiction is usually a twofold illness, you know. We suffer from an allergy, you know, and we have a twofold illness really. It's a physical craving and a mental obsession, you know. If I put something physical, as in a drink, heroin, type drugs, or something into my body, right? My body has a reaction to it. It wants more, right? I don't put that substance into my body. My mind is destroyed. I just can't stop thinking about it. It just plays on my mind and runs over and over and over because I don't know what the problem was. I only know this now through hindsight from doing a 12-step program, what it is I actually suffer from. And it's like, right, I have an obsession of the mind. And it's like, there was times I got clean and sober from all drinks and drugs from 2 or 3 months, but I couldn't stop thinking about them. And eventually then, because I did no walk around it, boom, the day would come and traffic could be bad, someone would annoy me, and my mind would just go, boom, I'm getting rid of this. Yeah. I had no control. I had no control. I had physically no control over it, Dan. As much as I had all the willpower in the world to try and stop, I had power to stop. Power had to come from something outside of me, something greater than me. And I didn't realise this, Dan, until I went with a beautiful son in 2008. And I thought, you know, if you could ever get clean, you'd think you'd do it for your children. You know, with a beautiful son in 2008, I held him in my arms and I swore I'd give up the drugs. But I couldn't. I couldn't. Not even for this young boy, Dan, could I stop. Not for my wife, not for my family, for no one. And eventually in 2010, my wife had just got enough. She was just sick and tired of it. And I physically couldn't really walk anymore. So I went to treatment for the first time. I went to a drug treatment centre and I got clean. I came out there 4 months later and I did a day program. But I had all this psychology, Dan, and there's so much psychology, you know, me feelings and this, that, and the other, and all. I'd no God in my life, you know, still. But I found fellowships, NA, all the different fellowships. You have AA, NA, CA, Cocaine Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, or Alcoholics Anonymous, you know. And I was trying these meetings and I kept hearing about sponsorship and the steps and all, but I wasn't ready. I was going to do it Darragh's way. And I had a beautiful daughter born. the day I was a year clean, the 4th of February 2011. I was a year clean on that day, and she was born. But 3 months later, then I was back in addiction, and I was caught back in it. I found drugs in my shed, and I went back at it because I had all this psychological stuff, but I had no real, I had no real proper. How would you say? I'd no really, I'd no defense stand against this. I had all this knowledge, but knowledge isn't it all. I needed a power greater than me, and I was back out in addiction for a couple of months, and my father passed away. And my dad was so close to me, Dan, and growing up all my life, he was there for me, and he passed away on the 19th of December 2011. And that really broke me. I went into a serious addiction after that. A relapse, and that was it. All systems were out, and I couldn't stop. I had tried methadone programs. I had tried going to the mountains. I had tried so many different things, but nothing worked. And that went on for another nearly 10 years after that. And it wasn't until August the 30th, 2022, I was down to about 8 stone from crack cocaine and heroin, tablets, weed, and alcohol every day, and spending a lot of money. I've broke bones, I've titanium elbows, I'm missing bits of my fingers, I've arthritis, I've scars, lumps, broken up, all from drinking and drugging while working. I'm a carpenter, and all these accidents, and I still couldn't stop. So I was down to about 8 stone this August of 2022, and I was really broke. And I'll never forget, I was my wife Eilish went to work one day, and I was in the bed, and I got up and I got sick. Whatever was in my stomach. And I remember sitting there back in the bed, and I was shaking. And my daughter, who was only 11 at the time, she came into me, and she looked and she said, "Dad, are you okay?" And I remember saying to her, "I am, honey. I just had the vomiting bug." And she said, "Okay." She says, "When you're better, I'll make you a cup of tea." But Dan, I seen the fear in this young girl's eyes. And when she closed the door, I remember sitting there in the bed thinking, I'm going to die here. I'm going to die. And I remember thinking, I lost my dad when I was 33 years of age. This was 11 years later, and I'm still trying to get over this. Says, I'm going to lose, these two little kids are going to lose me, and I'm going to break their hearts. And I remember that, Dan, just getting out of bed that day, and I got on my knees, and I just looked up to the ceiling, and I just said, Dad, please help me. And I also said, God, please help me. You know, I think that day I surrendered to the drink and the drugs, Dan. I knew I was beaten. So I opened
So
my wardrobe.
you realize you weren't like you couldn't control that.
No,
You
no.
had to surrender to
For
that.
years, Dan, I always thought I could control it. I could get off it when I really wanted to get off it. I just didn't really want to get off it now. This was the delusion in my mind. And addiction is a great way of making us deluded. Gives us throws us up, it tricks us so many ways. You can get off this when you really want it. You just don't need to get off it just yet. But I think I knew this time, Dan, that was it. I was like, no, I'm beat here. I had to surrender. And that's the first step in my program is, we admitted we were powerless. Our addiction and our lives had become unmanageable. And that's when I think I really admitted my powerlessness there, Dan. And there's a lot of humility in that because, it's the only time that you really surrender in anything that you actually come out victorious, because you have to surrender to God's will, to be triumphant in the end. But I had mentioned God there when I got on my knees, Dan, and that was probably the first time in a long, long time since I ever mentioned God. I used to go to church. I used to go in for funerals, christenings, things like that, but they had no real significance to me. I had completely had no really God in my life at this stage. But I don't manage to take enough methadone that day to keep me from getting sick. I had loads of methadone in my wardrobe. And the next day I took it. And the next day I took it. And the next day I took it. Now I was still going through withdrawals from all the other drugs, so I hadn't really slept. So it was a Saturday morning and I'm on my way down to a local AA group. And I hadn't really slept. And I knew my local church was opened. And my dad has a little plaque at the back of the church. And I said to myself, I'm going to go in, I'm going to say a little prayer to my dad. And I'll light a candle. So it's about 9:30. And I'm on my way down, and I goes into the back of the church. Now I'm like death, you know. Hadn't slept. I'm 8 stone, and I'm completely full of anxiety, full of sweats, cold turkey, sweating, all detoxing the whole lot. And I goes in and I says a little prayer where my dad's plaque is at the back of the church. And I went up and I lit a candle for him. And I asked him to help me. Well, there's a statue of Our Lady on the right hand side of the altar. And I lit a candle to Our Lady and I asked Our Lady, I says, please help me. You know, I went over to the left hand side of the altar where there's a statue of the Sacred Heart of Jesus there. And I lit the candle. I looked at the candle. I didn't look at the Lord, but I looked at the candle. And I just says, God, please help me. I don't want to live like this. I said, and I don't want to die. I said, please, only you have the strength to help me here. And as I said that, Dan, I looked at the statue and I looked him in the eye and I says, please, God, help me. And in that moment, I didn't see his hand move, right? But I felt something touching my shoulder. And when he touched my shoulder, Dan, it was like I'm a carpenter and I've been electrocuted a few times and I got these goosebumps. It was like an electric shock just ran through me. Every hair on my body, from my toes to my head, stood up. And I remember jumping back like this and going, what's after happening here? And then I just started crying uncontrollably. I mean, sobbing like I never sobbed before. And the tears just flowed from me. And I remember a voice in my head saying, oh, Darragh, the drugs are after fucking you up now. You're fucked, you know? But then I heard this voice from deep inside, and it was deep and it was loving and caring. And it said, Darragh, everything is going to be all right. And as soon as he said it to me, Dan, cold turkey, sweats, anxiety, everything that I was feeling completely just left my body straight away in an instant. And I'm standing here and I felt serenity. Probably for the first time in my life, I felt serenity. And I'm thinking, wow, that's amazing, you know. And the local priest must have seen me crying at this statue. I don't know how long I was there for. He came running down, you know, and he just looked and he said, Darragh, is everything all right? And I just looked and I went, it is now, Father. The big man has me back. So I explained what happened. And he took me off and I asked him for confession. And I asked him to get, I had a few resentments with the church and stuff like that. And I went up to the room and I sat there and I got confession and resentments. I floated out of that church, Dan. I came off 70 mils of methadone a week later, which is not recommended. But I kept praying. I kept going to mass every day and I kept praying to the Lord. And I did a 12-step program. And my life
Wow.
was changed. Yeah. My life just changed. I let
Wow.
God into my life.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Remarkable. I mean, something stood out to me when you were saying about how you went from trying to do this yourself, trying to get out of this
yeah,
yourself, and then it's like you alluded to it, someone having to reach in and pull you out of that.
yeah,
Like there's that analogy that said like that you're walking along and you fall into a hole, and as much as you try and get out, you can't.
yeah,
And then your friend comes along and they try to pull you out and they can't. But
yeah,
then, then God comes along and he comes down and
yeah,
he's the one who's able to take you out. And I think, yeah, so there's, I mean, I was also thinking another thought as well. Many people, they might not struggle with this, addiction to that level, but
yeah,
we all struggle with the delusion that we can do this ourselves.
yeah, yeah,
That I don't need God. I'm okay. God is
mm,
just a crutch. But
yeah,
you you have to surrender to the fact that you can't save yourself. You can't lift yourself.
yeah,
You can't lift yourself by your bootstraps. You have to
yeah,
open yourself up to the possibility that God exists, and it transforms everything.
yeah.
Yeah.
It has to be a power greater than us, Dan. You know, I said,
Mm,
I tried with all the willpower for me kids, for me family, for this, for that, for the other. I tried with all Darragh's willpower. I tried everything that doctors could do. I tried everything that medicine could do. I tried every method possible. Not one of
mm,
them was I successful with, Dan. For 25 long, hard years and hard addiction. That's not the minor stuff in my younger days, you know. That's hard addiction to heroin, crack, tablets, weed, methadone, and stuff like that, you know. Uh, Nothing worked. But in an instant, when I opened my mind and my heart to the Lord Jesus Christ, that was it, you know. I wasn't
mm,
plain sailing after that, Dan, you know, but I knew I could get through it once I had the Lord in my mind. I tried everything possible, and there had to be a power greater than me. And I wasn't clean, all easy sailing from there on in, you know. I still had struggles, I still had troubles. And that's where the 12-step program came in. But, you know, you talked about having to let God into our life. The 12-step program is 4 step We admit we are powerless over our addiction, that our lives have become unmanageable. That's surrender. Second step, we came to believe in a power greater than us that could restore us to sanity, you know, and that's coming to believe. And that's only, you don't have to believe yet, but you have to kind of get the notion that there's a power greater than us, and we have to turn our will and our life over, which is step three. We have to turn our will and our life over to God, as we understand them. And that's every day I do that. Then a fourth step is insertion of fearless moral inventory of our steps. Fifth step, we read it out, what we've just written. It's usually our life story to God, to another person, which is usually our sponsor. Sixth step, we have a list of defects. We're willing to ask God to remove them from us. Seventh step, we ask Him to remove all these defects. Eighth step is we make a list of all the people we've harmed. Ninth step is we make amends to these people. And then 10th step is we do a daily inventory with prayer and meditation each day and run through our day as we're going through our day, keeping God in our day. And the 11th step is the same, Dan. It's like a little confession at night time. Was I selfish, dishonest? Did I hurt anyone? Do I owe an apology to anyone? I run that over every day. And then my 12-step walk is me just bringing this out to people and giving this message to other people, and that's right there. I sponsor people, Dan, I bring people through the big book. Get people that really, I wouldn't say they're atheists, they'd be agnostic, which is they've no knowledge of God. And I open them up to the concept of, well, here's what God did to me. He can do this. If He done this for me, He can do this for you if you just let Him in. And they usually do the program. And some of them, not all of them, but some of them stay clean and sober. Some of them don't, that's up to them. But yeah, I mean, look, it's been an amazing journey. And I've been helped so much with people in my parish because I've had Father John ask me to go to Medjugorje. I was about 5 or 6 months clean and sober. And I just says, yeah, do you know what? I'd go. But I hadn't got much money because I had still taken time off work. I was going to mass every day. I was doing whatever I could. Medjugorje really blew my mind. Then that changed everything because I didn't know what adoration was. I didn't know much about fasting. I kind of knew fasting for a health purpose and stuff like that. But when I went to Medjugorje, I fasted while I was over there. I heard about adoration and I says, what's this all about? And I remember Father Leon doing a great talk one day and he says, adoration, he says, is like you go to the park with your wife. He says, you don't have to sit there on a beautiful day on the bench and just keep talking to your wife. He says, sometimes you can just sit there in silence and feel the love from your wife and you can just sit there and enjoy what it is. And he said, well, it's like that with adoration. You don't have to keep talking to God. He says you could just sit there with the Lord and just be in still and just be, feel His love. And I felt that over there, Dan. When I was over there, I felt that. And then I had the sacrament of reconciliation. I really, as I said, I did a confession after my experience with the Lord, but I can't remember much of it. But this one I did in Medjugorje, I was up been fasting all the Friday, and while everyone went for dinner, I went to confession. And I must have had a priest for about 45 minutes, and I just opened my heart and soul to him, Dan. And I floated out of that confession box. It was an amazing, amazing feeling. And then to wrap it all up near the end of the journey, Father John says to me, he hands me a piece of paper on the last night and he says, by the way, he says, I want you to read this. Tomorrow we're doing the Holy Mass, the English speaking Holy Mass. And I says, what is it? And he says, will you read this? And I looked and it's scripture. And that was the first reading. And it's about an A4 page long. And I'm looking and I'm saying, Father John, now give me a prayer of the faithful. I'll do a prayer of the faithful. And he said, no, I want you to read this. And I was like, wow. So I stood up in front of the English speaking mass, live cameras and all that, and I read out the first reading. And I just asked the Lord, I remember sitting there and I remember my heart, I could see my heart beating out my chest, I remember sitting in the little side of the side of the altar and the little place where I was involved in the mass are sitting. And I just closed my eyes and I just said, Lord, I'm going up here to do your work. If anything, just please allow my voice to be clear and loud, My knees shook, my hands were shaking. I think I was rattling the ambient, I think every part of me shook, but my voice didn't, Dan, And people come up to me afterwards and said, you proclaimed the gospel today, And it was a feeling. And I came home from Medjugorje and I start doing readings in my local church now. I read every Sunday in my local church. I took part on part of the parish council I started out part of the parish council. I did testimony here in my local church, and I had people coming up to me and asked me to be part of prayer groups. We set up a beautiful prayer group, and another priest, Father Adrian Crowley, who does a lot of work with people in addiction with Shanaklo community, Shanaklo, and we do a lot of work up in this house. We do men's prayer groups where we say the rosary. We try and sing, but we're not too not none of us are too lyrically gifted with our voices,
I've
but
heard you sing. Yeah, I heard you sing.
I
Try is carrying a lot of weight there.
yeah, the Troy. How did the word is Troy? Yeah. Um, but look, and we give it a good shot. I do loads in my community. I'm a volunteer in my community here, Dan, for the parish. We do pilgrimages. Me and the lads, we go to Loch Derg every year, which is probably the toughest pilgrimage on the Christian calendar. It's fasting for 3 days. You're walking in your bare feet. You stay awake and do an all-night vigil and pray. And when I say pray, I mean you pray. I mean there's no holds barred. At the end of the day, when you're hungry and tired, you kind of get a hybrid of the Our Father and the Hail Mary. It's an amazing what the mind can do when you're hungry and tired. But the feeling you get when you complete the island and when you're leaving the island, because it's like Alcatraz. It's a little island. It's like Alcatraz, But it's an amazing feeling. I do that every year, Dan. I go on pilgrimages to Croagh Patrick. We climb Croagh Patrick. I've been to Knock. I went off there on a father-son pilgrimage down to Waterford. We did St. Declan's Way from Waterford to Tipperary. We camped out for 3 nights. There was 28 fathers and 44 sons. We prayed the rosary while walking through towns and over mountains and all that. Yeah. Camped out for the 3 nights while we were there. Amazing, amazing experience. I've done that with the Dominicans here because I used to work for them. And it was an amazing experience. And then, I go and then I said we volunteer, do local work in the area, and I do pilgrimages, and then give me testimony up and down the country. Then,
Yeah,
I
thanks be to God. Yeah.
share my
What
testimony. Yeah.
maybe just one more question really. I mean, you touched upon like how your family took this, difficulty that your kids had seeing you like that. I was just wondering if you had like any advice for family or friends who maybe have someone in their lives who, someone who's struggling in their lives and what they can do really, if they can do anything.
I suppose the main thing, Dan, and even with myself, was never to give up hope. And I shared about when we were on a pilgrimage, we were on the pilgrimage of hope, the Jubilee of Hope this year in Rome, and I suppose it was very fitting that, even the depths of my addiction, I never gave up hope. And I had family members, Dan, that never give up hope. They'd go to Medjugorje and they'd pray for me. And they'd bring me back little things. Now I wasn't in the land of the living, and they'd give me these little stones and these beads. I'd put them in my vans as I'm driving around, and I always kept them. I never threw them out, but I always kept them. Somewhere the Lord was always walking inside me. I just had the door closed down, where He was always there knocking. And people prayed for me, Dan, and that's what I say. If you have family members, pray for them. Don't give up praying for them, and never give up hope. And just try your best to be there for them. A lot of the time, they don't really, not all of them, not everybody in addiction, but a lot of the time that they don't want to be there. They don't want to be taking the drug. They don't want to be drinking. They want to stop. One, they're just full of fear. Two, they don't know how to stop, you know. And that's the problem is that the lack of there are things getting a little bit better now, but it's hard for people, and they're caught in the cycle and they just can't stop. And society doesn't help too much either nowadays. Everything is like, you know, instant gratification, phones, people, kids, that from a very, very young age now, it's like this instant gratification, this addiction mindset, sugary foods, instant phones, stuff like that. And we've gone away, drifted from what we used to be close to in the past, which was prayer, meditation, fasting, sitting with ourselves, talking to people. Now you're sitting in a room and there's four people and four people are on their phones and not one person's talking. The only conversation is like, oh, here, did you see this? Where I go down to Mass now, Dan, and we go after Mass, we have tea and coffee in the little pastoral centre, and we're all talking with people from different communities. Great Indian communities starting to rise up over here now. There's a lot more people, and we've got a lot of people from Africa as well. So we're all sitting there in the room, all talking. Not one person's on the phone. We're all talking, and it's amazing, And so I think that's what it is. Just people just need to start talking a little bit more,
Yeah.
and never give
And
up hope, Dan.
never give up. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I mean, you said it's the Jubilee of Hope this year,
yeah,
and that's really the message of this
yeah,
year is never give up hope
yeah.
with the Lord. Yeah,
And
absolutely.
and you know, when we were in Torvagata, Dan, you know, there was over 1 million, I think it was 1.2 million people in this one place, all gathered there for the same purpose, for God, you know. And to see these young people, as we heard them on the trains, we seen them in Rome when we were there, to hear these young people all chanting and praising the Lord, you know, singing songs in all their different languages, but everyone knew what they were saying, and then everybody joining in, you know. That to me gave me hope, Dan, that, you know, it's not as dark as the world and the media would like us to believe. That, you know, I find and I feel with my parish and with what I bring people through the program now, you know, 12-step programs, I see a lot more people now, Dan, starting to turn back to God. And you mentioned Carlo Acutis there, you know, I see a lot of young people now looking up to this. And, you know, for myself, uh, to look at faith or to be a man of faith when I was growing up was kind of a sign of a weakness. You know, that's what I thought, Dan, you know. Don't let anybody know you're into that God stuff, you know, that's a sign, that's a weakness, you know. Now I believe and I know, Dan, that that's a strength. And it's an unbelievable strength to put your faith in the Lord Jesus Christ and to know, I say to people, I've been gifted. The Lord done for me, Dan, what he done for me. I know the Lord exists. And I understand some people, you know, they haven't had what I've had. And it's like, you know, they want to find it, they want to see something. I put my trust and my faith in God every single day with every decision I make. And I say, God, it's in your hands. Because if it's on Darragh's will, if I run on Darragh's will, I'm going to crash straight into a wall at 100 miles an hour. But if it's God's will, it's going to happen. It's going to happen. I just stop fighting that. I
That's
step
brilliant.
out of the way and let God do it for me, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I
Yeah,
mean, you're talking about the Jubilee there. I just finished with this thought, but in Rome, you had all these people from all these different countries, and you know they had traveled there, but what had gone before them was the Lord, and He'd traveled to all these far flung places across the world to bring these people, these young people to Rome. And so I was thinking about that, how He goes out and He reaches out to all these nations,
yeah,
but he also reaches out to individuals. So
yeah,
even in the midst of great darkness, Jesus is the one who goes and sits with that person in the
yeah,
darkest moment and tries to draw them to him, because he's the one who rescues us. You
yeah,
know, he's the one who goes to that dark place with you.
yeah,
So that, I think that's the great message of hope. Not only are there, you know, a great number of people coming to faith now, thanks be to God, but the great message of hope is that however far we may go from Him, He is always willing to come and rescue us
yeah,
if we allow Him.
yeah.
Yeah.
And
Thank you.
I love what you just said there, Dan, about the darkness, because you know I'm not very big. I try to read a bit of scripture now, Dan, you know, but I wouldn't be like yourself. I wouldn't know as much as yourself. I'm only new and I'm only learning, right? But one of my favorite passages, right, in scripture is just as you just said there, is John 8, chapter 12, and it says,
Mm,
"I am the light of the world. The one who follows me will never walk in darkness. Rather, he will have the light of the life." You know,
mm,
that's one of my favorite bits of scripture. Of the little bits that I know, I just stick to the New Testament kind of. But I love
yeah,
that one because it hits home with me, Dan, because it's like I was in the dark, very dark place. And it just hits home with me because it's like I trust in the Lord and I follow him. And he has just opened my world to an amazing, amazing thing. Like things, I say life beyond me wildest dreams. I ain't
mm,
exaggerating, Dan. And it's so simple. But
yeah.
it's driven with God. Everything is driven with God, you know.
Thanks be to God. Praise to God.
Praise the Lord.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you, Dara. Thanks for
Super.
sharing your testimony
Yeah.
and for joining us for this episode. And yeah,
Yeah.
please return again for maybe another discussion. Love to hear
Yeah.
more.